Sewing Palace. Thank you for joining us for our online quilt along with Double Dozen by Kaye England. We are actually on month 8 already, and so we're going to be making a block called the crow's foot block. It's a really cool block, and when you change your fabrics or you rearrange your blocks, it makes the coolest thing. So you're going to see that here in a moment. I'm going to show it to you on grayscale because when you start to add color, that's when it really changes. So come on over and we'll look at the things that you'll need and the block. And so you'll need a nice sharp rotary cutter of some sort. You need some scissors. You need some sort of marking utensil. I love the friction iron erase pens. A good quality quilting thread. This is Orifil 50 weight cotton quilting thread. You'll also need some best press. And I'm going to show you this cool new sprayer that is a super mist sprayer that will disperse the best press really smoothly and be more efficient. And then you'll also need, I've got a wool pressing mat right here, an iron to my side, I've got a cutting mat underneath. And then last but not least, we have our specialty ruler from Bloc Loc, which is a Flying Geese unit. It's 1.5 by 3 finished. We have used this ruler before. And you'll also need a couple basic cutting rulers. This is the Quilter Select. These are new rulers that reduce the slip, and they're absolutely awesome. So you'll need a square ruler or something to cut your fabrics with. And then you're going to need to pick some fabrics. So let's look at your block in grayscale to start off. So this is the crow's foot. It's a 12-inch finished block, and it is made up of some straight units or straight squares. These are 3.5-inch squares. So these corners and then the center are 3.5-inch squares. And then these squares here are also just a straight square, and they're cut out of a light fabric. And then these squares here are cut out of possibly a medium or a dark. You'll kind of see it, the different colors that will happen, but these are easy squares to cut. Now the other units that are in here are connector units and Flying Geese units. So right here is a Flying Geese unit. It's also over here, over here, over here, but wait, it's also right here, 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 and here. So those are the Flying Geese units. And then the connector unit is this unit. It's a long rectangle. It's 2 inches by 6.5. And then you sew little squares onto the side. So there's one here, 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 and here. So I believe you are super comfortable cutting these basic squares. There's no changes in the basic squares. You're going to follow the directions after you've picked your fabrics. But there are some changes that you can make for the Flying Geese units. And Bloc Loc is such a wonderful system. They also have a system that makes 4 at a time. So we've done this before. When we look at our block, we need a total of 8. We needed 4 out here and 4 here. And so we need a total of 8. When we look at the no waste method, it allows you to cut 1 big square and 4 small ones. And at the end, it will yield 4. And then you will do that one more time to get your other 4 for the block. Now this unit, if you were to follow the directions, it's normally cut. If you look at your Flying Geese unit, this light square would normally be cut 2.5 by 3.5. And so what that finishes to is 1.5 by 3. So that's how you figure out which Flying Geese ruler would you need. I need a 1.5 by 3-inch Flying Geese unit. And then you would refer to your chart. So now I'm looking at my chart, the Flying Geese sizes. I'm looking at the finished size, 1.5 by 3, and it tells me to cut 4 small squares, 2 5/8, and 1 large square at 4.5. So that's how I figure out the math. All right, so now we're ready to make our Flying Geese units. Let's look at our fabrics and start picking some fabrics. So here we are with a light fabric. These are all Kaye fabrics. This is a light fabric. We've got 2 mediums and a dark. And so what our Flying Geese unit is going to be made out of is a light and this dark. So right here I have them set aside, and this light fabric is going to be cut to the 4.5, and this one you will end up with 4 2 5/8-inch squares for one set of a Flying Geese, which will yield 4. I'd like to show you this cool new sprayer, which is a lovely sprayer which makes your spraying more efficient. You can put best press, you can put flatter, you can put water, you could put water with lavender and lemon in it, whatever you want to do. But inside this sprayer is an atomizer, and it will make a very fine mist out of whatever liquid you've put inside. and it makes your best press a little more efficient and not splatter out. And so this is my best press. I've chosen Caribbean Beach, so it has a little bit more of a blue color, and then I used a silhouette cutter to cut my letters so I know what I have in there, because I have several of these bottles at home. So my best press, when you pull the trigger, it will pull a lot longer, so you have a lot longer time to depress it, and it will just mist very nicely, and you'll get more use out of your best press. So I'm going to go ahead and spray this. I've got my wool mat underneath, and I'm just going to give this a spray. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but it will spray for a longer period of time and really get a nice dispersion over the fabric. And then you'll iron it with your hot iron to get that best press to soak in and really stabilize your fabric. And so I've got a Panasonic iron here that is cordless, which is awesome, and it will just nicely press this. And you want to press it until it is dry, and generally you don't want to pick it up when it's real hot. You want to let it cool in place so that it stays in the comfortable grain that it was already established at. Once you've got that done, you're going to cut this. So this is the one that's cut to 4.5. So you'll need your square ruler. So you're going to grab your square ruler and you will cut a 4.5-inch square. So I cut one side, cut one side, then the other side, and then I'll rotate it, or I'll cut with my other hand. And I'll square up to the line that is 4.5, both on my left side and on the bottom. So I'm squaring up here and here, and then I'm going to cut the remainder so that I have a beautiful 4.5-inch square. So there's my square, and then after you're done cutting that, you will have cut your 2 5/8, and then you will lay those so that 2 of them lay on right sides together, and they will overlap in the center. This is correct. And then you will mark with a friction pen from point to point. Now remember, a pen will take up a little bit of space, so when you're marking it, you want to make sure you have enough room for your pen to make the line and not over mark it. So I've got my friction pen, and then I'm just going to mark all the way down. And then what I'll do after I've marked it is I'll sew on each side of those lines. I still have my marking right in the center, and I'm going to cut in between that to yield 2. Let me cut that in half real quick. Then you'll have 2 of these units, and then you'll press them so that they look like a heart. That'll look like that. And you want to press that seam up towards the dark, so I'll just take my cordless iron and just press that up. And I've also best pressed that dark fabric prior to cutting it as well, so it's a nice stable surface. And then you'll have your other 2 squares that you had from before, and that one gets laid on this square like so, the other on the other square after you've pressed it. And again, you will mark from point to point on that, and then you will sew on each side of the line. So we're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew on each side of the line. So I've got a Bernina 790 and a dual feed 1/4-inch foot, and I've started on a little piece of fabric. I call these stoppy starties, and I start sewing just with that on that stoppy starty, and then I'm going to feed in my fabric so that the edge of the foot is at a 1/4 inch seam, and it's running along my marked line. I'm going to sew down to the end, and then I'm just going to feed it in the other way and sew on the other side. Come off to my stoppy starty, and then I'll cut my unit out like so. Okay, we're back to cutting and ironing. So we're back over here to our cutting. We'll cut that puppy apart, yielding 2, and then the other half will yield 2, and then you'll press this. So let me press this real quick, and then we'll trim it down with a Bloc Loc ruler. And we will have our flying geese units done at that point. All right, so now you're going to trim this unit so that you have a beautiful block. So what happens with the Bloc Loc is it locks into your seam here, and then you have it at the diagonal there and there. And you're going to trim all the way around. All right, you can see it's not square, but it's going to be beautiful here in a second. So I'm just going to trim on all 4 edges, like so, like that. One more time, and then on the very bottom. And I will yield a beautiful 1.5 by 3 inch finished flying geese. You're going to need to do that process 2 full times so that you will yield 8 of these units for your block. And I'll show you the next unit here in a moment. All right, so we're now on to the connector units. The connector units are the units that live in the block that are right here. So there are 4 of them, 2, 3, and 4, and they will look like this. They are a long strip that is cut 2 inch by 6.5, and then for each long strip you are going to need 2 connector units that will go onto the corners. You will sew diagonally and flip them out. I'll show you a couple tips for that in a second. But when you're looking at your directions, we did the flying geese a little differently. So on the dark C, it said we needed 24 in the directions, but we made it a little bit differently using flying geese no waste method. And we only need 8 because all we're working on now are the connector units, and 4 of them, there's 2 per unit. So that yields a total of 8 2-inch connector units. So let me show you how to make this block. Again, this is going to be best pressed, and you're going to have the 2-inch connector units. They're going to go right into the corner, nestled in so that the edges are all lined up. You're going to mark diagonally from point to point. And again, you want to have room for your pen so that your line is going right through that point. And when you start sewing this, you want to start sewing not necessarily from the corner. Sometimes your machine loves to suck that corner right in. So I'll start sewing from this end right here because it's a straight edge. And you want that stitching to be right on the line, not a 1/4 inch away. You want it right on the line. So I'm going to come over to my machine. I have a Bernina 790 and I have a dual feed 1/4 inch foot, but it's a straight stitch foot, so I have the dual feed in the back. And I'm starting to sew on a small piece of fabric that I call a stoppy starty. And I'm going to start sewing so that it's just coming off the edge of the stoppy starty. My machine will hover, and then I will place that needle right lined up with that line that I've marked, and then the other end should line up with my plate or my board so that it's going to come right off. And then you're going to sew right on that line. And you can get another stoppy starty that you sew onto so that you are just keeping that system very efficient. So I'm just going to feed in that stoppy starty, and then I'll take out my unit and we'll go look at it at our pressing mat. So here's the unit that I just sewed, and I'm going to flip and press that unit out. Okay? So the reason why you want to be right on that line is you started with a 2-inch by 6.5, and all you're doing is adding a piece of fabric to it, and it should measure 2-inch by 6.5. But frequently, once you flip that over, you can see even on this block, it isn't right even. I have a little extra fabric. So there's a couple tricks to that. And I also have another one that is sewn here that you can see a little bit of that light colored fabric underneath. So when you have a scenario like that, this should still measure 2-inch by 6.5. So before you cut off the extra underneath here, you'll want to see what you have to make sure that your block is straight. So I'm going to cut out that extra purple first. I'm just going to pull those 2 away, and I'm going to cut it with about a 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to lay it back out and kind of look at my block. So you can see that that light colored fabric is still hanging outside just a little bit. So that means that block is still 2-inch by 6.5, but when I go to sew it, I'm going to leave that light colored fabric in place. And if I were to square this up, I wouldn't be trimming any of that top fabric out. If you can see just that little nubbins hanging out over here, and then if I scooch it down to the end, I will have just a tiny bit of purple, and that's just because I didn't sew right on the line. So now I'm going to leave that light colored fabric in. When I go to sew it to another block, I'll use that light color as my line for my 1/4 inch seam. When you get ready to sew the other side, you want to make sure you have the angles proper so that they're both forming a opposite angles versus the same angle. So you'll lay that right sides together, mark it diagonally, sew it right on the line, and flip it out, and you will have your connector unit. So you do that 4 times so that you have 4 connector units. Good luck, happy sewing. Now we've finished all of our units for a block, and we're going to put them together, and there's a couple ways you can do it, a variety of ways to get different looks for your blocks. So come on over and take a peek at these cool units. So on Kaye's book we have the crow's foot block, and it's located right here. Again, it is on point, and she's got a dark fabric in the center, a dark for her little flying geese units, and a dark for her connectors, just like we have, and then a medium out in the corners. And it creates a real nice looking cross that you can see, which we have over here in our block. It just is different colors of fabric. So we have the dark flying geese, the dark connectors, dark flying geese back out there. We've got a medium here and a medium here. And what's cool about this block is that you can make a couple of changes to it. What if you put a dark maybe right in the center, and look how it changes that block. You can really see maybe the diagonal movement of it. And then if you do a medium that has a little bit more of a contrast, you get more of a starburst in the center. Or what if we used the same fabric in the center that we have out here? Isn't that crazy how it changes the block? But even more, you could take the connector units, like so, and turn them around. And it's really quite interesting what you'll get when you're done. I'm going to pull this unit away. So what's going to happen is these connector units will start to form what looks like a circle, and that's what we have in the quilt here. So we've got our center star. Here's those connector units right here, here, and here. And normally those connector units would be facing this direction if you followed the book, but if you flip them around like so, you create kind of a circle around the whole block. So have some fun creating. If you want to make it following the book directions, you'll have these angles the same. If you want to make the circle, you could flip your connectors. So have fun creating. Good luck. Happy sewing. Signing off from the Sewing Palace here in Helena. Bye-bye.